I don't propose to be swept off my feet by the catastrophe. We must learn the truth and endeavor, if possible, to fix the responsibility. The administration will go on preparing for war, but still hoping to avert it. President William McKinley.
Secretary of the Navy John Long shared McKinley's measured approach. Long made special efforts to meet with congressmen to discuss alternatives to war. One afternoon in late February, Long took time off and left Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt in charge. Roosevelt cabled Commodore George Dewey to gather his Asiatic squadron in Hong Kong, only 600 miles from the Philippine Islands.
That came very close to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy making the decision that we're going to take the Philippines as a part of this war against Spain, not necessarily against the President's wishes, but without the President's knowledge.
And so TR put it into action because his superior didn't want to take the initiative, nor did the President want to take the initiative. But when it was done, they let it stay, which was sort of a vindication that it was the wise thing.
President McKinley solicited from Congress $50 million for national defense.
It was reported in the press, both in this country and in Spain. And the Queen Regent was really impressed by the fact that McKinley could get $50 million to fight Spain simply by asking for it.
Vermont Senator Redfield Proctor, an affluent businessman and respected legislator, visited Cuba to evaluate the situation for himself.
Because it was known that he was close to McKinley, reporters began following Proctor around, asking him what his conclusions were from his trip to Cuba, and he refused to say anything. By the time he was ready to speak on March 17th, 1898, there was tremendous interest in what he'd have to say.
I went to Cuba with a strong conviction that the picture had been overdrawn. What I saw I cannot tell so that others can see it. To me, the strongest appeal is not the loss of the man, but the spectacle of 1.5 million people struggling for deliverance from the worst government of which I ever had knowledge.
After Senator Proctor's speech, the business community came around. So McKinley now had the military better prepared. He had the Pacific Fleet ready to go. He had a united business community behind him. And once he had those things coming together, McKinley was changing and was moving towards war.
The final push came on March 25th, when the Naval Committee investigating the Maine explosion reported its findings. The explosion had been caused by a submerged mine. Though the report never fixed responsibility, few doubted that the Spanish were to blame. On April 11th, President McKinley addressed Congress.
In the name of humanity, on behalf of endangered American interests, I ask Congress to authorize the President to take measures to secure a final termination of hostilities and a stable government.
Not in behalf of Cuban independence, but basically to end two competing claims to sovereignty, the Spanish claim of sovereignty and the Cuban claim of sovereignty, and by implication, clearly establish a third claim of sovereignty by force of arms.
Cuban rebel sympathizers in New York were enraged.
This is nothing less than a declaration of war by the United States against the Cuban revolutionaries. We would resist with force of arms as bitterly and tenaciously as we have fought the armies of Spain. Cuban Representative Horatio Rubens.
Senator Henry Teller proposed an amendment that would appease Cuban rebels.
The United States disclaims any intention to exercise control over Cuba, except for pacification, and asserts when that is accomplished to leave the island to its people.
It is true that they have not entered into an accord with our government, but they have recognized our right to be free and independent, and that is enough for me. General Calixto Garcia.
On April 22nd, President McKinley ordered Rear Admiral Sampson to blockade Havana. Spain responded to U.S. naval maneuvers with a declaration of war. Congress immediately followed suit. halfway around the world in Hong Kong, Commodore Dewey received a dispatch from Secretary of the Navy Long.
Proceed at once to the Philippine Islands. Commence operations against the Spanish fleet. Use utmost endeavors.